The Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors: EliteForm.com, IgnitionAPG.com, PlayUSA at PLAEUSA.com, and Sorinex Exercise Equipment at Sorinex.com. And now, the Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast. Welcome to Iron Game Chalk Talk with your host, Ron McKeefery.
Every time our athletes walk into this weight room, they're going to be pushed to the max.
Let's go! Everything you got!
On this podcast, hear Coach McKeefery's straight talk about training, featuring the top strength and conditioning professionals from around the world. And now, here's your host, Ron McKeefery.
Hey guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and this is episode number 113. Iron Game Chalk Talk is a weekly podcast where I bring you experts in the field to talk shop. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes or YouTube, or join the mailing list at ronmckeffery.com to stay up to date with the latest guests or anything else that I have going on. This week, super excited to have Jake Beiting with us. Jake was on my staff at the University of South Florida, came down as an intern for us, has gone on to be the head strength coach for the Houston Astros, had stops along the way, and just a fantastic person, great guy, great strength coach. Couldn't be prouder of the coach that he's become, and just excited for you guys to get a chance to listen to him talk. We talk a lot about baseball training, the annual plan, how he's able to get professional athletes to buy into him, having not played high-level baseball, and a little bit about the travel and the recovery techniques that he uses with the team. But before we do, I want to make sure we recognize all of our sponsors. We have EliteForm.com, PlayUSA.com, IgnitionAPG.com, and of course Sorinex. And the reason why I'm shooting this video here in our garage is because I finally got the opportunity to put together our Sorinex rack in our garage. And this is the Base Camp Sorinex Uber package. And man, we couldn't be more proud of it. We couldn't be more excited as a family to train out of it. It was a big, big addition to our garage gym. And I don't know about you guys, but this is something that I wish I would have done a long time ago when I first started getting into strength and conditioning, because, it's just great. It's hard to train where you work sometimes. B, training our families and making our fitness and our lifestyle a part of our family is one of the biggest benefits of what we do. And lastly, it's great to have a place to train if for some reason you're out of a job or you don't have something going on, and just it's so hard to go to one of these big box gyms. But Sorinex Base Camp Rack, we're having a lot of fun training out of this, and when it comes down to it, bottom line is when I have the opportunity to put something in my garage for my family to train off, this is by far the best thing, especially in a tight situation with being able to have multiple points to add attachments and there's lots of variety and things like that. So I couldn't say more about Sorinex.com. Make sure you check them out. Check out their different packages, and if you're in the market for a weight room, put together a weight room, something like that, reach out to the bird in the game there. Just fantastic people, do it the right way. So couldn't say more about them. I want you to sit back, enjoy this episode, take lots of notes, and we'll see you on the other side. Super excited to have a friend of mine, Jake Beiting. Jake's the head strength coach for the Houston Astros, former staff member, just a guy that's killing it, doing a fantastic job everywhere he's ever been, and it's such a neat experience for me to be able to have these guys on the show, and just so proud of the strength coaches that they've become, and it's a testament to all the hard work they've done. And but Jake, man, I know you're squeezing this in, so I appreciate you doing it, man. Thanks for coming on the show, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on.
Jake, let's go into that a little bit. I talked a little bit about you coming down to South Florida, but what kind of gets you into the business, and then kind of what's been your path to get to the Astros there?
Sure. Yeah, I started off. I kind of lucked into an internship working for the Cleveland Indians when I was in college. So that was 2004. I started working in the Major League weight room there under Tim Maxey. I did that for 2 years. Then once I graduated, came down and spent that almost a year with you at South Florida, and then went back to the Indians in a full-time, really good full-time opportunity. Spent 6 years working full-time in their minor league system. The first one as a minor league strength coach, the last 5 I quit. And then had some connections with the Astros when that job opened up, and this is my 3rd year here now.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned that you did the Indians as kind of part of your undergrad, and I think maybe that if I asked you what was unique about your experience, you would say that you got the opportunity to work at the elite level as a junior, senior in college. How did you go about kind of setting that up, and what could some of these young strength coaches take away that are maybe listening to this and they're in their junior year of college?
Sure. Well, I was fortunate that my college had the exercise science internship. Through our department, there have been that connection for a few years, or a few guys that went to my school that did that. The biggest thing for me was I made a lot of sacrifices to keep doing it. Changed some classes around. There was a lot of I had to be in working at about 7:30 on Sundays, so I gave up a lot of Saturday nights and a lot of Friday nights that what I would have spent otherwise out at the bars and having fun with some of my friends. But when the team was in town and it was in season, I worked a full schedule, even going to school. So just being willing to make some sacrifices if you're passionate about it. And, I was pretty aware of what the opportunity was. There was no question that was something that was the right way to get my foot in. The guy who done it before me is actually now my minor league coordinator, but he got hired full time right out of the internship. So it was all laid out for me. After a week or two of doing it, it was pretty obvious that was a career path that I wanted to take. So I figured I didn't want to waste any opportunity. I actually stopped playing football right at the same time. Partially, I had some injuries, but also partially because I was aware of how good the opportunity was if I fully committed to it.
Sure. Well, you talk about sacrifice, and obviously, and we'll get into it a little bit, but the baseball schedule, there's a tremendous amount of sacrifice, not just on your personal time, but just the commitment and year round and all those types of things. And let's talk a little bit about kind of that annual plan. I mean, you have the players for a significant portion of the year. You're traveling quite a bit. How many? Let's go into kind of the basics. How many times a week are you trying to get them to train in season, out of season, and how do you kind of communicate that?
Sure. So we have a plan laid out for the entire year where we look at the schedule and say, okay, here's the normal ebb and flow. There's some historical data on injuries. The month of May, for whatever reason, has the highest number of soft tissue injuries each year. Just as an example, there's a lot of different things like that, factors we look into to say, when do we need to give rest? When do we need to push more? How do we need to change up training? You look at your schedule itself and know, just for an example, we flew in, we had a night game in Cleveland last night. We got to our hotel at 2:30 in the morning. So I know the guys are going to be tired. They're not going to have as much sleep as they normally would. And they're coming off of a flight, so they're going to be a little bit tight. So, today when we get to the park, I'm instead of really trying to get guys to lift weights or do that kind of thing, I'm going to be more on getting guys to do what we call our prep work. Foam rolling, stretch, a lot of good muscle activation. Just focus on being prepared that way as opposed to truly training today. But typically what we push for, I break everything down by 3 groups. We've got our position players, our relievers, and our starting pitchers, I should say. And the position players and relievers, typically I want them to get 1 lift in per series. Series are typically 3 games. Sometimes they're 4, sometimes they're 2, but 9 out of 10 are 3 games. So it works out pretty well. Some guys like split up their routines. Some guys like to go full body. My preference is a full body lift. Usually the lift itself, 25, 30 minutes, a couple leg exercises, a couple back exercises. We usually will do chest. Some guys aren't comfortable doing it. That's not one I try to overly emphasize too much. But try to talk to every player every day for sure about that. And, everybody's a little bit different. Obviously, some guys are easier to get in there. Some guys are a little more challenging. Some guys like lifting before the game. Some guys like lifting after. as long as the guy's going to get it done, I don't have a strong preference either way.
Right.
Usually I try to get guys in before games, though, just because baseball doesn't have a clock. So
Right.
some of those games are 4.5 hours, some are 2.5 hours. So I'd like to kind of remove variables when possible and try to get them early. Probably the easiest, most consistent group to work with is the starting pitchers, because they have 4 days off in between outings, so they do the closest thing to an off-season program. They do a pretty big volume of work the day after they pitch, high intensity too. You can actually work them hard to the point where they're sore for a couple days. And then the relievers are challenging because they never know when they're going to pitch. So I've had some veteran guys who just said, every Tuesday and every Friday I'm going to lift, because those are never off days, and they're always night games, just with the way MLB does the schedule. So I say, hey, at 3 o'clock every Tuesday, 3 o'clock every Friday, I'm going to get it lifted. Some guys like doing it right after they pitch. And again, for me, as long as the guy's consistent, he's getting his work done. For me, I'm happy. So whichever way it works out.
Right. How do you maintain your sanity? Because like you said, some guys want to go before, some guys want to go after, some guys want to go at 3 o'clock. How do you maintain your sanity as a strength coach, and not, because it's easy when you're young, especially, to get caught up in the emotion and the focus of strength conditioning being kind of your whole world, but obviously it's not the whole world in MLB, and really any situation. It's just a piece of the pie.
Sure.
How do you keep your sanity as far as just the crazy schedule?
Well, first off, it's for me making sure I'm realistic, making sure I'm really paying attention to what's going on with the player on the field. If a guy's playing really well, we had the batting average title winner last year, Jose Altuve, had 225 hits. So there were a lot of days he was on base 3 times a game, and he won the stolen. He stole more bases than anybody else too. So he was running more than anybody else. So knowing that if a guy's doing really well and he's on base a lot and he's running extra, that he's going to be more fatigued, or if he's having some struggles and mentally he's really stressing and pushing himself, it's going to be hard, maybe a little bit harder to get him in there. So trying to make sure, number one, that I stay really aware of what's going on. Number two, that I'm really realistic about my requests for when we get work in, and that I communicate with players also. Let's say, if we're playing on Sunday at home and we have one day off, to say, hey, listen, we got a chance here where we can really work a little harder. Let's get the most out of this. This is a big day. We have that opportunity. Let's take advantage of it where we can. Really communicating well is the best you can do, and trying to hold guys accountable to what they want to do. If a guy says, hey, my program is do upper body day 1 of a series, lower body day 2, and they don't show up to do it, to make sure you go back and tell them, hey, you told me you were going to show up to do this. You told me this is your routine. That wasn't me telling you to do it.
Right.
You're not to your own expectations. Trying to make it realistic, and trying to build in some accountability is the ways to do it.
Well, when you're trying to individualize programs like that, what's your process? Obviously with pro baseball, you're dealing with guys that might be, the young kid versus the guy that's been in it for 10 years. How do you, when you first get a player, how do you establish what's going to be the culture? How are you going to make it individual to them, and then how do you go about holding them accountable to that?
Sure. So that's a great question, because it's been really different for me each of my 3 years here. This year I'm starting to see the fruits of our labor in the minor league, where the guy that's our minor league coordinator and our minor league strength coaches have done a really nice job of implementing the program the last 2 years that we wanted, the way we wanted. I'm seeing now the players who've gotten called up this year and spent the majority of their minor league career in the strength conditioning system that we wanted. It's much easier. Those guys are doing a lot of things the way that we want them done. And we've been able to already individualize them at the lower levels. There's a lot of different things that we'll look at, but with an older player, we signed several, veterans this year who had 6-7 years of major league experience, 10 years of professional baseball experience. Period. Have worked with some great strength coaches. So for me, I always want to learn that guy's routine before I start dictating this is what you need to do. And that's for me, that's a several month process. There's some guys whose routine I won't change at all. Some guys, once I feel like I've gained their trust, after a few months, I'll start making some recommendations for changes. And those with the older players. The younger players, it's a little bit easier. Guys who came up in our system, it's a little bit easier. But there's a lot of different things that we look at. So, obviously a person's personal preference comes in a little bit to how we choose their routine. But you look at a player's injury history. We do a lot of testing, in spring training and then throughout the season also, from body composition to functional movement to white balance to some grip strength. We do vertical jump tests. We kind of get the goal is to get a whole profile of a person. What or do you lack power? Do you lack strength? Do you lack the ability to move well? And then whichever one of those areas they're a little bit more deficient in, we'll try to focus on a little bit. Obviously, everyone's going to do some strength work. Everyone needs to do some mobility work. But which guy do we emphasize the strength more or the power more? A lot of our bigger, stronger guys, it'll be more about the prep work and power work. We won't really try to do much for hypertrophy. Just a little bit to make sure we don't lose it. But just try to see what the needs are based off of our testing, based off of their history, and then their personal preference also, and go from there.
Oh, that's great. You mentioned, that you've been able to implement a system now with the minor league, with your minor league affiliates and kind of carrying it all up. When you took over, how did you go about, it's kind of, you're not only just taking on a staff for, one of the first times, but you're taking on a staff that's in multiple different cities. How did you go about communicating your expectations and establishing a program throughout with the craziness of pro baseball?
So I was really, really fortunate that I was able to bring in my own minor league coordinator, guy I worked with in Brendan Verner, going back to our days. And we actually went to college together. Like I said, he started the same way I did, interning with the Indians and then working several years in the minor leagues together. And he had gone off and worked at some other places, worked for Jim Malone out in San Diego, seen some different things that I hadn't, so had some different experiences. And he's really good at his job, which has helped me immensely. So having someone that I trusted in the minor leagues that I knew could really focus on making sure all the strength coaches were well trained. Because I can only spend so much time with them. I communicate a lot with our AAA strength coach because we have so many players who come up and down pretty regularly with our AA strength coach. Again, because we have some players who come up from AA, but a lot of times the guys in A-ball, other than just maybe 1 or 2 calls a year just to check in and see how they're doing, I'm not going to see or talk to them that much. So I put a lot of that on our minor league coordinator. And especially my first 2 years in spring training, we did a lot of in-services. Make sure these guys understood the techniques we wanted taught. A lot of it was the day-to-day stuff like that, but also more big picture. How do we want to run this organization? How are we going to structure the day-to-day activities? We have a strength conditioning coach manual that we give each one of those that we update a lot every year that lays out the basics of the program and reports that we want them to do, which are done every 2 weeks. Just so there's a lot of different components that come into it. Our minor league coordinator goes and visits each affiliate at least 2 times a year. Usually a first half and a second half visit, which part of that is to see the players and to do some testing, body comp testing every time he's there. But a big part of it also is to evaluate our strength coaches as he's going in the strength conditioning program to make sure things are being ran in a uniform way as much as possible.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that the travel and how challenging that can be. And on top of that, you would add recovery, I'm sure. What are some things that you're doing that are unique? I mean, everybody foam rolls, everybody cold tubs, everybody does, but is there anything that you're doing that's fairly unique from a recovery standpoint?
I would love to tell you we're reinventing the wheel. We're not. I mean, we're trying to make sure we have all the resources that are available to the players. The last 2 years, the compression pumps have gotten a lot bigger. The Normatec type deals. So we have players that will use that every day. A lot of guys bought their own units for the house. Mm-hmm. I try to do a couple different things. Or I have a yoga instructor come in twice a homestand. For guys that want to do that, try to have a little bit different way to recover and restore some mobility. We've started. I think one of the big trends in the industry right now is all these different tracking systems. Things like Catapult and Zephyr and Omega Wave. We're exploring that, kind of trying out a lot of things on some of our minor league players that are working out of our spring training complex to see if that's a route we can go to track workloads and see if we can make some recommendations. One of the things for recovery that we try to do is communicate a lot with our coaching staff. Our manager, AJ Hinch, is really good about listening and being open-minded to say, hey, if a recommendation for him, maybe we shouldn't take early hitting today, or even just working in a day where batting practice is optional, which certainly is not the norm. He's willing to back off a little bit on some of the fundamental workload, because basically the structure we have is go through a full practice and then come off the field, take a little break, to eat some food, and then you go right back out and play the game. So I'm shortening up that practice time where even if a guy's just sitting and he's not on his feet, it's pretty important. So
absolutely,
try to do as much of those different things as we can.
That's smart, man. We wrap up the show, Jake, with some resources. Give me the best piece of coaching advice you ever received.
Gosh, there's just been so many. I mean, between working for you, working for Maxie, and some of these other guys, there's so much good advice. Not being hard-headed when the athletes need more rest. Making sure it's about them, not about what you want. Being comfortable with what you know. I mean, make sure you always push and learn more. Both from reading, visiting people, just kind of being relentless with trying to get better. In your own knowledge and what's out there, staying up on current research, industry trends, going out and visiting with other strength conditioning coaches, sports psych people, scientists, whatever it may be, to keep learning about what we do and human performance and how to make these athletes better.
Well, it's something that we always talk about on the show, but just continue to reiterate. It's you're a lifelong learner. You're never, you don't ever have any of all the answers, and as you age and get better in this profession and all that, we all just starting to figure out the right questions to ask. And I know that you feel the same way. What about do you have a quote that you live by, or one that you always say, or have plastered up in your weight room somewhere?
One of my favorite ones that's up in the weight room. One a million people have heard is most have the will to win. Few have the will to prepare to win. And I think that's really important. The winning doesn't just happen. I'm very fortunate to work at the highest level in sports, and everybody is super talented up there. There's no question. There's only 700 Major League Baseball players, in the world at any given time. And, they are the absolute best. So trying to find out what makes them. What can you do that makes you a little bit better? How can you be more prepared than the other person? And obviously there's a fundamental side to that, but there's the physical side of that too. Over 162 games over 6 months is pretty grueling and taxing. So making sure that you're doing the work to be ready to be there in October when it matters.
No doubt. What about when you're interviewing minor league coaches, minor league coordinators? What was a question that you would ask that was, maybe outside the box, but to try to get to the root of who the person was?
Honestly, I was always interested in, why are you wanting to work for, in professional baseball? Number two, why do you want to work in athletics, period? It was always interesting. There were some people that really haven't been able to answer that question. They didn't really tell you why. It just seemed fun. Tell you a lot about themselves in a negative way. Things being maybe a little bit more selfish motivations than what you like here. hire some people here who are really super passionate about baseball, which you have to be with the schedule being what it was. And if you're going to ride the buses in the minor leagues for a few years before you get up to this level, I mean, you got to love it. There's no question about that. So that, for us in our setting, that's been really important. Is
Absolutely.
What's the person's motivation for wanting to work here?
Well, being on the buses and planes and hotels and the whole deal, you got lots of time not lots of time, but you've got opportunities there to, listen to podcasts and websites, check out websites and read books. What give us a book, website, and app recommendation that you use with your athletes.
So one of my favorite book I've read recently, last couple of years, has been The Sports Gene. David Epstein, I believe.
Yep. Epstein.
Illustrated writer. That was just phenomenal. The amount of research he compiled and put together. A lot of big picture things started to make sense. I mean, I've noticed I've started to really look at the athletes I work with differently based off of some of the things that were presented in that book. For me, like I mentioned before, it's really important to stay up on the research. So going through the NSCA journals, being able to search for different topics on their website is such a nice feature. Being able to find all that information, as well as going through the ACSM journals and everything as well. Online, those are both really two websites I utilize a lot. Honestly, the app that I use the most, that I find, being in an administrative role, I tend to look a lot at the Harvard Business Review's app. A lot of good information about leadership and structuring of organizations and department. It's not always an apples-to-apples comparison. There's not always 100% carryover, but there certainly are a lot of themes that work and are really useful and applicable in our world.
No, that's a great one. I'm glad you mentioned that one. It's a fantastic app. Well, buddy, I know you got in at 2:30 last night. It's 9 o'clock in the morning when we're shooting this, and you got to get to the ballpark. And I truly appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate how you're going about your business and how you've gone on from the old Tampa days, and just really excited that for you and for where you're at in this profession, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely, appreciate you having me. This is fun.
That's it for this episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk. Thanks to this week's guest as well as our sponsors for bringing this episode to you for free. Make sure to check out ronmckeefery.com, where you can join our mailing list, find the show notes, including all the links and resources mentioned, and information about Coach McKeefery's other products. While you are there, please join Coach McKeefery in the comments section thanking our guest for sharing. If you haven't subscribed to Iron Game Chalk Talk on YouTube or iTunes yet, make sure to do so. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome. Coach McKeefery can be found on Twitter at @RMcKeefery, on Facebook and YouTube at /Ron.McKeefery. That's it for this week. Be sure to check back next week for another great episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk.